The millionaire went to take a KAPE BARAKO at the coffee shop, and at the sight of the waiter's ring, he started sweating cold. Before continuing this story, please leave your like and subscribe to the channel to continue receiving exciting stories firsthand. Manila, a hot and muggy morning, with the sky tinged with orange hues as the sun rose over the bustling streets of the capital. Bayani de la Cruz, known as the construction magnate, parked his luxury SUV in front of a modest cafe in the Tondo neighborhood. Dressed in an impeccable suit, he seemed out of place in that setting of simplicity. Something inexplicable had brought him here, a desire to escape momentarily from the pressure of his empire. He ordered a KAPE BARAKO, the traditional Filipino coffee, and sat down at a table near the window. As he waited, his eyes fell on a detail that seemed to belong to another life: the ring on the young waitress's finger. Simple, small, but unmistakable. Bayani felt his chest tighten. The air seemed to leave the room. He knew that ring like he knew himself. Suddenly, a memory came to him like a bolt of lightning. Luz Viminda, with her sweet smile and hopeful eyes, holding that same ring as she said, "Bayani, maghihintay ako. Bayani, I'll wait for you." He had left her to pursue a life of ambition. Now, more than 2 decades later, fate seemed to be playing tricks on him. He looked at the attendant again. It wasn't just the ring that disturbed him. Something about her aroused a deep, almost familiar feeling. "Sir, okay lang kayo?" asked the young woman, Dalice, with a gentle smile. Bayani de la Cruz, now in his 50s, felt a strange tightness in his chest as he watched the young Dalice, whose smile seemed to light up that small cafe in Tondo. The ring on her finger had transported him to a past that he had spent decades trying to forget, but which at the same time had never really disappeared. Dalice, still not understanding the reason for the customer's discomfort, tilted his head slightly, waiting for an answer to his question. Her eyes were deep and sincere, but there was something else in them, something Bayani recognized. He saw in that young woman the reflection of Luz Viminda. "Sir, are you all right? Would you like some water?" Dalice insisted, now worried by the man's glazed look. Bayani took a deep breath, trying to regain control. He was a man used to dealing with high-pressure situations in the business world, but there, in front of that girl, he felt like an amateur. He raised his hand, gesturing vaguely. "No thanks, and that ring." Dalice looked at his own finger, frowning. It was a simple ring, but special to her. "Oh, that? It was my mother's. She said it was the most valuable thing she had, so she asked me to take care of it. Why? Have you ever seen anything like it before?" Bayani's heart almost stopped. He tried to disguise the wave of emotions that was consuming him, but his voice came out shaky. It's a very beautiful ring. Your mother, is she still around?" "No, sir. My mother died when I was younger. It was just her and me, and it was always like that. She was all I had." Dalice's gentle smile gave way to a shadow of sadness, but she quickly smiled back. "But she always said that I was strong, like her. That's why I carry this ring with me. It reminds me of her." The words hit Bayani like a storm. The name came to his lips before he could stop himself. "Luz Viminda." Dalice's eyes widened in surprise. "Yes, that was my mother's name." "How do you know?" Bayani froze. He knew that at that moment he had crossed an invisible line that could no longer be erased, but before he could say anything, the sound of a phone ringing on the counter brought Dalice back to his routine. "I'll be back in a moment, sir," she said, rushing to take the call. Bayani sat back, his hands shaking. There was no longer any doubt. Dalice could be his daughter. The weight of the revelation was overwhelming. He thought of the years he had wasted, of the woman he had abandoned in search of success. Luz Viminda had loved him with all her heart, but he had chosen his business over her, believing that love could wait. He had been wrong. Then he began to remember. The air in Cebu was heavy with salt and melancholy that night. Luz Viminda stood at the edge of the pier, holding the small ring in her hands. Bayani was standing in front of her, already dressed for his trip to Manila, where he had received a job offer he couldn't refuse. "I'll come back to you, Luz," he said, trying to convince her, and perhaps himself. "As soon as I've built something solid, a life that the two of us can share, I'll come back." "And if you don't?" Luz Viminda asked with tears in her eyes, but without letting them fall. "I will come back. I promise," he said, before turning away and disappearing into the darkness of the night. Luzviminda had never believed in promises, and she was right. He never came back. Bayani spent the rest of the day in the cafe, watching Dalise from afar. Her every gesture, her every smile, her every move, everything reminded him of Luzviminda. He didn't know how to deal with the whirlwind of emotions that now overwhelmed him. When he finally plucked up the courage to stand up, Dalise was closing the till. "Sir, you've been here all day. Did you like our coffee that much? Then I want to know how you knew my mother's name." Bayani forced a smile. "It's a special place. Very special." He hesitated before continuing. "Dalise, I'd like to talk to you more at another time. Is that all right?" "Of course, sir. You can talk now or come back another time. You know where to find me." Bayani went to his car and took out a business card. He knew he couldn't reveal the truth right then and there, but he had to act. He needed answers. As soon as Dalise left to close the cafe doors, Bayani handed her the card. "If you have some time, please contact me. It's important." She looked at the card curiously. "Do you own a construction company?" "Yes, but that doesn't matter now. Just call me." Dalise gave a small smile and nodded. "Okay, sir. Have a good night." As Bayani drove back to his luxury condominium, a single phrase echoed in his mind. "What have I done?" Bayani couldn't sleep that night. The image of Dalise and Luzviminda's ring gave him no peace. He hired his trusted investigator, Efren, to find out everything he could about the young woman. Efren returned with a detailed report in less than 24 hours. "She really is Luzviminda's daughter, sir," he said, his face serious. "Her mother died 10 years ago of an untreated illness. They lived in very difficult conditions. Luzviminda never married. She raised the girl alone, working as a seamstress." Bayani felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Efren's words pierced his soul like daggers. He knew he should have gone back. He knew he should have chosen Luzviminda over his ambition. Now all that remained was a daughter who didn't even know he existed. He faced Efren with tears in his eyes. "I need to see her. I need to tell her the truth." Bayani decided to go back to the cafe in Tondo. Dalise welcomed him with the same warm smile as before, but now he knew how much that smile cost. "Dalise," he began, his voice shaking, "I need to tell you something very important." She frowned, confused, but waved him to sit down. "Of course, sir. What is it?" Bayani held her hands, feeling the weight of all the decades of regret. "I knew your mother, Luzviminda. I was someone important in her life, and I believe I am your father." Dalise was silent for a few seconds, but for Bayani, that instant seemed like an eternity. He could see the confusion in her eyes, the shock mixed with disbelief. She took a step back, as if she needed space to process what she had just heard. "Sir," her voice faltered, trembling. What are you saying? My father?" Bayani swallowed, feeling a knot in his throat that seemed impossible to undo. He had planned so many ways to reveal the truth, but now that he was face to face with his daughter, nothing seemed right. He felt the weight of 2 decades of wrong choices crushing down on him. "Dalise," he began, his voice breaking. "I know it's hard to believe, but I knew your mother, Luzviminda. We loved each other. I was a coward and left her behind when she needed me most. And, from what I found out, you're my daughter, the daughter I never knew I had." Dalise's face contorted in disbelief and pain. "You must be mistaken. My mother never spoke of you, never mentioned anything about who my father was. I could see that she even believed that someone would come back. And to be honest, I stopped asking when I realized that the day never came. And I saw that it was a subject that made her suffer." Her words were like knives through Bayani's heart. He tried to move closer, but she took another step back, raising her hand as if to prevent him from coming any closer. "Dalise," he continued in despair, "I've made a lot of mistakes. I thought I was doing the right thing by leaving you, that I was looking for a better future for both of us. But I never went back. I never looked for her. I was selfish. Life went on, the business grew, and after so long I was even ashamed or afraid of looking for her and it being too late. Your mother was a beautiful and wonderful woman. I didn't think she was going to wait for me. And now I'm here in front of you, trying to make amends, even though I know it may be too late." Dalise shook her head, fighting back the tears that were beginning to gather in her eyes. Too late. Of course it's too late. My mother died years ago. She worked day and night to raise me, to keep us alive. Do you have any idea what she went through? Do you have any idea how she suffered? The intensity of the pain in Dalice's words made Bayani feel the ground open up under his feet. He imagined Luzviminda, alone, struggling to raise a child without any support, while he built a luxury empire. He had been a monster, blinded by his own ambition. I didn't know. I never had another wife or children. I just loved your mother all my life, he whispered, almost inaudibly. Exactly, Dalice exclaimed, now crying openly. You didn't know because you didn't care. You got on with your life while we were left behind. My mother never complained, never blamed me. But I knew there was a void in her heart that no one could fill. Bayani tried to explain herself, but all she could say were empty excuses. I can't change the past. I can't bring your mother back, but I can try to be something for you now. I know it's a lot to ask, but please let me prove that I care, that I want to be here for you. Dalice laughed bitterly, wiping away the tears. Prove it? What do you think is going to happen now? That I'm going to run into your arms and call you Dad? You don't understand. You have no idea what it means to lose everything, what it means to grow up without anyone by your side. She took a deep breath, trying to regain control. Do you know what my mother always said? That I was strong, that I could face anything. And she was right. I faced losing her, I faced loneliness, and now I'm going to face you too. Dalice turned abruptly and walked back into the cafe, leaving Bayani alone on the sidewalk. He stood there, feeling the weight of her every word. He knew he had lost something precious, something he might never get back. That night, Bayani couldn't sleep. Dalice's words echoed in his mind like an incessant refrain. He walked around the huge empty apartment where he lived, his shoes echoing on the marble floor. Every detail of the place, the works of art, the imported furniture, the panoramic windows overlooking Manila, seemed like a cruel reminder of the price he had paid for his ambition. He picked up an old wooden box that he kept in a cupboard. Inside were memories of a time he had buried long ago, letters and photos from the time he and Luzviminda were lovers. Bayani, I hope you're well. Things are difficult here, but I'm still waiting for you, as I promised. Bayani felt the tears slide down his face. That was the first letter he had received from her. Then he changed his address and didn't receive any more letters. He wiped them away in a hurry, but he knew that the pain inside him was greater than any hasty gesture could erase. He wondered how many of those letters had been sent to the wrong address and never read. How many times Luzviminda had waited for a reply that never came. The next morning, Bayani returned to the cafe. He knew that Dalice might not want to see him, but he had to try. As he entered, he saw her cleaning the tables, her face serious but still illuminated by that strength that had impressed him so much. You again, she said, without hiding her displeasure. What do you want now? I've already said everything I need to say. Please listen to me, Bayani begged, holding up one of Luzviminda's letters. I want you to read this. It's one of the letters your mother wrote to me. It's the only one I received. I know that nothing will ever erase what I did, what a cowardly man I was, but you deserve to know the truth. You deserve to know that even though I failed her, she never stopped believing in us. Dalice hesitated, but took the letter. Her eyes ran over the words, and gradually the tears began to fall again. She held the paper tightly, as if trying to connect with the mother she had lost. She believed in you, Dalice whispered, almost to herself. Even after everything, she believed. I know I don't deserve her forgiveness, or yours, Bayani said, her voice trembling. But I'm here now. I want to be part of your life if you'll let me. And if I can't, I'll understand. But please, just tell me what you need. Anything. Dalice looked at him, her eyes red from crying. She didn't answer straight away, but for the first time Bayani saw something different on her face. It wasn't acceptance, but perhaps a small space for something new to begin. That night, Dalice sat in her cramped room, holding the letter. She reread her mother's words several times, trying to understand how she felt. Part of her wanted to hate Bayani, but another part, that small part that was still the child longing for a father, wanted to believe that maybe he could make up for lost time. Finally, She picked up the phone and dialed the number on the business card. "Sir Bayani," she said hesitantly. "Dalisay," he replied, his voice charged with emotion. "I want to talk," she said. "But that doesn't mean I've forgiven you, not yet." Bayani nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I accept, and I thank you for giving me this chance." That night, they both knew they were beginning a journey that would be full of pain, redemption, and perhaps something approaching love. Dalisay sat at the table in the small cafe in Tondo, her heart still heavy with the decision she had made. Agreeing to meet Bayani de la Cruz meant opening a door that all her life she had believed would be closed forever. The man who claimed to be her father was a stranger to her, a shadow who had appeared out of nowhere, but who somehow seemed to carry the fragments of a story she had never had the chance to know. That night, as she prepared for bed, her mother's words echoed in her mind. Luz Viminda used to stroke her face in moments of difficulty and say, "Anak, kahit mahirap ang buhay, huwag mong hayaang masira ang puso mo. Ang tibay mo ang magdadala sa atin." "Daughter, no matter how difficult life is, never let your heart break. Your strength will sustain us." Dalisay held the ring on her finger and sighed. His mother had been his fortress, but now that same fortress seemed fragile in the face of the memories brought back by Bayani. The next morning, Dalisay went to meet Bayani in a more sophisticated cafe, different from the small establishment where she worked. Bayani was already there, sitting at a secluded table. He was wearing an impeccable suit, but his countenance was tense, vulnerable. Dalisay hesitated before sitting down. "I'm here, but I want to make it clear that I haven't come to forgive you. I just want answers." Bayani nodded slowly, holding a cup of coffee with trembling hands. He knew he couldn't rush anything. "Thank you for giving me this chance, Dalisay. You don't know how much this means to me." She crossed her arms, impatient. "If it means so much, then start talking. Why did you leave us? Why didn't you ever come back? My mother, she died without any answers, and I lived my whole life without knowing who I really was." Bayani took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the guilt he had been carrying for more than 2 decades. "I was young, ambitious, and foolish. When I got the job offer in Manila, I thought I was doing the right thing. I promised your mother I'd come back, but I lost my way. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to build something big. But in the process, I lost what really mattered." Dalisay shook her head, her eyes full of tears. "Did you know she was waiting for you? You can tell from her letters that she believed in you. Even when life was hard, she never stopped believing that you would come back, and then nothing." Bayani looked away, unable to face the pain in her eyes. "I have no excuses, Dalisay. I can only say that I was a coward, and every day of my life since then has been a reminder of that." Dalisay let out a bitter laugh. "Coward is too little to describe what you did. My mother deserved better. I deserved more." Over the next few days, Dalisay found himself reliving memories of his childhood. Growing up without a father was never something she openly questioned, because Luz Viminda had always compensated for the absence with unwavering love. But now, with Bayani suddenly appearing in her life, those old wounds were starting to sting again. She remembered the nights when her mother worked late, sewing clothes to make ends meet. She remembered the tiredness on Luz Viminda's face, but also the smile that never disappeared. "Anak," her mother would say, as she handed over the last garment of the evening, "Isang araw magkakaroon tayo ng mas maginhawang buhay, pangako ko yan. Daughter, one day we'll have a better life. I promise you that." But that promise never came true. Luz Viminda fell ill, and the weight of life fell entirely on Dalisay's shoulders. That night, lying in her bed, Dalisay cried softly, holding her mother's ring. She felt betrayed, confused. Part of her wanted to believe that Bayani was there to make things right, but another part, the most wounded, knew that some things could never be repaired. Meanwhile, Bayani was in her office, going over the reports that Efren, the investigator, had given her about Dalisay's life. Each page felt like a condemnation. He saw Luz Viminda's medical bills, the accumulated debts, the photographs of a young Dalisay working in difficult conditions to survive. Bayani sank his head into his hands. He had money, influence, power, but none of these resources could change the past. He had failed Luz Viminda, failed Dalisay. A few days later, Bayani returned to the cafe where Dalisay worked, this time bringing with him something more than empty words. He asked to talk to her again, but Dalisay was reluctant. "I don't know why I keep listening to you," she said, crossing her arms. "Maybe it's because deep down, I want to believe that you have something good to offer, but so far, all I've heard are excuses." Bayani bowed his head, defeated. "I don't know how to fix this, Dalisay, but tell me what you need. I'll do anything." Dalisay looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes again. "I don't know what I need. My mother was everything to me. She raised me, gave me strength, taught me everything. You were never part of that, so now I need time. Why do you care now and want me to forget everything so quickly?" Bayani took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure. "Because when I see you, I see everything I've lost. You're my daughter, Dalisay. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I can no longer live knowing that I abandoned you and your mother." That night, Dalisay returned home and burst into tears. She felt overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to push Bayani away forever, but another part, that child who had always wanted to know who her father was, wanted to believe that he could be different now. She picked up the phone and called Bayani. "I want you to meet me tomorrow, not here, in the place where my mother was buried." Bayani was silent for a few seconds. "I'll be there." The next day, they both met in the small cemetery. Dalisay pointed to Luzviminda's simple grave. "Here she is, the woman you left behind, the woman you broke." Bayani fell to her knees in front of the tomb, tears streaming down her face. "Luzviminda, forgive me. I was an idiot, a coward. I didn't deserve you. I didn't deserve any of this, but I promise I'll take care of our daughter. I promise I won't fail her like I failed you." Dalisay stood watching the scene. She didn't know if it was enough, but for the first time she felt that Bayani was being honest. As the days passed, Dalisay gradually allowed Bayani into her life. It wasn't easy, and each conversation brought new layers of pain and regret, but somehow they both began to build something. A fragile bond based on honesty and regret. Bayani knew he could never replace Luzviminda, but he was determined to honor her memory. He proposed to Dalisay to open something together, a restaurant called Bagong Simula, New Beginning, a tribute to Luzviminda's strength and to the future they could both build together. The pain was still there, but it was gradually giving way to something new, hope. Bayani found the space to set up the restaurant and began to prepare everything. The days at the Bagong Simula restaurant were becoming more and more intense. The project was taking shape, with walls freshly painted in warm tones and polished wooden tables ready to welcome the first customers. Despite everything, Dalisay still harbored a twinge of skepticism. She saw Bayani's effort, but the hurt of years of absence still prevented her from fully trusting him. Bayani, for his part, devoted himself wholeheartedly to the restaurant. He arrived early to organize the suppliers, supervised every detail in the kitchen, and even insisted on setting up the flower arrangements for the tables. The Bayani that Dalisay now knew was not the man she had imagined, distant and cold. On the contrary, he seemed to want to be present at all times, even if she didn't ask him to be. One afternoon, while adjusting the arrangement of the chairs, Dalisay saw Bayani trying to fix a lamp that was flickering on the ceiling. He was on a ladder, balancing precariously, his suit clearly inadequate for the task. She couldn't help but smile. "Are you sure you know what you're doing, Bayani? Or do you want me to call an electrician?" she teased, her tone slightly lighter than usual. Bayani looked at her, surprised by the unexpected sympathy. "I'm a businessman, but I also know how to handle tools, or at least I think I do." A pop echoed, and the lamp went out completely. Bayani climbed down the ladder, disappointed, but Dalisay let out a soft laugh. "Well, it seems your talents don't include electricity," she said, crossing her arms. He laughed along, the sound so rare that even Dalisay was surprised at how genuine it sounded. It was a simple moment, but for both of them, it felt like a small step towards something more human. As the days went by, Dalisay began to realize that, despite everything, Bayani was really trying. He didn't seem to want to impress her with grandiose gestures or empty promises. Instead, he showed his regret in simple actions. He made a point of being there every day, even when the work was heavy, and he never avoided the most difficult tasks. He organized his schedule at his construction company so that he could have more time with his daughter. "Don't you get tired?" she asked one day, as he swept the floor at the end of a long afternoon. Bayani smiled, leaning against the broom handle. No, I think this is the first time in years that I feel like I'm doing something important. Dalisay was silent for a moment. She still didn't know how she felt about him, but she couldn't deny that his constant presence was beginning to lower the barriers around her heart. One evening, while going over the last of the purchases for the restaurant, Dalisay found herself talking more freely with Bayani. He was sitting at a table jotting down details about the suppliers and seemed more relaxed than usual. Have you worked like this before? She asked, gesturing to the list of tasks. Bayani smiled. At the very beginning of my life, I worked building houses, but I managed to scrape together some money and set up my first construction company. That was a long time ago. And then I just gave orders. I closed contracts and managed everything. But it's different. Being part of the operation again is good to feel like I'm building something with my own hands again. Dalisay looked at him, trying to decipher whether his words were sincere. How come now and only after so many years you've shown up and are insisting on our relationship? Bayani put down his pen, his countenance becoming serious. Because I realized that I spent half my life building something empty. I've had everything I've ever wanted: money, success, status. But none of those trophies mean anything if you don't have someone to share them with. She looked away, absent-mindedly fiddling with the papers in front of her. It's easy to say that now, but my mother, she had no choice. She had to face everything alone. I know, Bayani replied, her voice heavy with guilt, and I'll never be able to make it up to her, but I want you to know that I'm here now. Not because I want to ease my guilt, but because I want to get to know you. I want to be part of your life, even if it means starting from scratch. Dalisay didn't answer right away. It was hard to fully believe, but there was something in his voice that sounded genuine. A few days before the restaurant opened, an unexpected problem arose. One of the main suppliers of ingredients cancelled the order at short notice, leaving Dalisay and Bayani desperate. This is a disaster, Dalisay said, pacing back and forth in the kitchen. If we don't get the ingredients, we won't be able to open on the promised day. And I don't want to start something so important with a failure. Bayani picked up the phone, determined. I'll sort it out. Leave it to me. He spent hours on the phone, calling old contacts, suppliers, and even friends in other provinces. When evening came, he finally found a solution. A small local market in Quezon City had what they needed. I've worked it out, Bayani said, entering the kitchen with a tired smile. It'll be more expensive, but we'll have everything in time. Dalisay stared at him in surprise. You went all the way to Quezon City to sort it out? Yes, he replied. I said I'd do anything to make it work, and I meant it. For the first time, Dalisay felt something akin to gratitude. She knew that, in the past, he could have simply thrown money at the situation and delegated the problem to someone else. But the Bayani who stood before her now was different. He was willing to sacrifice himself. Thank you, she said softly. Bayani smiled, saying nothing. He knew that those words meant more than she let on. When the opening day arrived, the restaurant was spotless. The tables were set, the aroma of freshly prepared dishes filled the air, and the Bagong Simula sign shone in the morning sunlight. Dalisay looked around, admiring the result of weeks of hard work. She knew that the restaurant wasn't just a business. It was a symbol, a tribute to her mother's strength and a possible start for something new between her and Bayani. The first customers began to arrive, filling the space with laughter and conversation. Dalisay was in the kitchen, helping to prepare the dishes, while Bayani welcomed the guests with a smile that seemed more genuine than anything she had ever seen on him. In a moment of calm, Bayani entered the kitchen to check on Dalisay. She was sweaty, but her face shone with determination. Are you all right? He asked. Yes, she replied, taking a deep breath. I think I am. He smiled. Your mother would be proud of you. I know I am. Dalisay stopped, looking at him. It was the first time she'd heard something like that from him, and to her surprise, it didn't sound empty. For the first time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, it was possible to build something with him. As the restaurant continued to fill up, Dalisay and Bayani worked side by side. There were no definitive words, no complete forgiveness, not yet. But there was something that hadn't existed before, a bridge. And as the night wore on, Dalisay realized that, Despite everything, she was willing to take one step at a time. Night had fallen in Manila, and the Bagong Simula restaurant was ending its first day of operation. Dalisay was exhausted, but at the same time she felt a satisfaction she hadn't experienced for years. Seeing her restaurant full, hearing the sound of laughter and lively conversations, was like bringing to life something that had only existed in her dreams. Bayani stood quietly in a corner of the room, holding a glass of tea and observing everything. He looked tired, but there was an expression of serenity on his face, as if he was finally finding a purpose in his life. When the restaurant was empty, he looked at Dalisay wiping down the counter and risked saying something. "Good work today," he commented, with a discreet smile. Dalisay paused for a moment and replied, without hostility, but with caution, "It was a start. It's too early to celebrate." Bayani nodded. He knew that her trust was still a fragile bridge, but he was willing to build every piece of that structure, even if it took the rest of his life. Later, at home, Dalisay fell into bed, exhausted. Although her body begged for rest, her mind was restless, full of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The image of her mother, childhood memories, Bayani's recent gestures, everything seemed to blend together in an avalanche of feelings that she didn't know how to process. When she finally fell asleep, she felt transported to a place she hadn't visited for a long time. In the dream, she was in her old home. The humble apartment looked different. The walls were painted. The air was light, almost welcoming. Next to the sewing table, sitting on a chair, was Luz Viminda. "Nanay?" Dalisay called out, his voice full of disbelief. Luz Viminda looked at her and smiled, a smile that radiated tenderness and peace. She looked younger, more alive, without the traces of tiredness that she had been carrying around for the last few years of her life. "Anak, you look so beautiful, so strong. I always knew you'd be like this." Dalisay rushed to embrace her, feeling the warmth of the presence he had been missing for so long. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Nanay, I miss you so much. There are so many things I wanted to tell you." "I know, Anak," Luz Viminda replied, stroking Dalisay's hair, "but right now I need you to listen to me." Dalisay pulled away slightly, confused. "What is it, Nanay?" Luz Viminda held his hands tightly, but her eyes were full of love. "You need to forgive your father." The words hit Dalisay like a shock. She shook her head, pulling back. "Forgive him? After everything he's done? After how he left us? Anak, I know he made a mistake. I know what he did hurt us deeply. But he's trying. I see the regret in his heart. You don't have to forgive him for him, but for you. Holding on to that hurt will only hurt you." Dalisay began to cry, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. "But Nanay, what about everything you've suffered? Everything we had to go through alone?" Luz Viminda tilted her head slightly. Her smile was calm, but her eyes were filled with wisdom. "I chose to forgive him a long time ago, Anak. Not because he deserved it, but because I needed peace. You need to find that peace too. Don't let this pain hold you back. Forgiveness is the only way to move on." Her mother's words seemed to echo in Dalisay's heart. She wanted to resist. She wanted to cling to the hurt she had held on to for so many years. But something in Luz Viminda's eyes made her hesitate. "I don't know how to do this, Nanay," she whispered, her voice weak. "Open your heart," Luz Viminda replied, holding Dalisay's face tenderly. "Let love in, you're stronger than you think." Before Dalisay could reply, the dream began to unravel. She tried to hold on to the image of her mother, but woke up with her heart pounding and tears streaming down her face. She felt as if she had been touched by something deeper than her words could explain. The next morning, Dalisay went to the restaurant earlier than usual. Bayani was already there, arranging the chairs and checking the papers on the counter. He seemed so focused that he didn't even notice when she came in. "Can we talk?" Dalisay asked, his voice softer than he had ever heard it. Bayani stopped immediately, surprised, and put the papers aside. "Of course. What happened?" She sat down at one of the tables, taking a deep breath to gather her courage. "I had a dream about my mother." Bayani's eyes widened, but he remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "In the dream, she asked me to forgive you," Dalisay said, struggling to keep his composure. "She said that forgiveness isn't for you. It's for me, because carrying this hurt is only hurting me." Bayani felt a knot forming in her throat. "What else did she say?" Dalisay looked at him, his eyes still charged with emotion. "She said that you're trying, that I should give it a chance. To both of us. Not because it's easy, but because it's right." Bayani bowed her head, silent tears streaming down her face. "Your mother was always stronger than me, wiser. I never deserved her love, and maybe I never deserved yours. But to hear that, to know that she believes there's a chance, that means everything to me." Dalisay wiped away her own tears and took a deep breath. "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive completely, but I want to try. I want to see where it takes us. Because despite everything, I can see that you're making an effort, and I think my mother would like me to give you that chance." Bayani looked up, deeply moved. "Dalisay, you don't know how much this means to me. I promise I'll never let you down again." She nodded, knowing it would be a long road, but feeling for the first time that maybe, just maybe, it was possible. In the days that followed, something changed between them. There was still hesitation. There were still wounds, but there was also a new disposition. They started working together in the restaurant, not just as business partners, but as people trying to build something real. One evening after closing the restaurant, Bayani brought Dalisay something. It was an old notebook with pages yellowed by time. "I found this in my files," he said. "Your mother gave it to me before I left. They're her family recipes. I thought you might like to have them." Dalisay took the notebook, touching the pages reverently. There were the recipes written by her mother, each one carrying a memory. "Thank you," she said sincerely. As the two of them looked at the notebook together, a small smile appeared on Dalisay's lips. For the first time, she felt that the restaurant, with its symbolic name, was fulfilling its purpose, to give them both a new start. That evening, looking at the sign outside, Dalisay felt a lightness she hadn't experienced for a long time. She knew that complete forgiveness would take time, but for the first time, she believed it was possible. And as they worked side by side, father and daughter began to build what should always have been theirs: a family. Days passed at the Bagong Simula restaurant, and little by little, a new routine began to form between Dalisay and Bayani. The restaurant was thriving, and the relationship between father and daughter, although scarred, finally seemed to be taking the first steps towards something deeper. Bayani made a point of being present for everything, from serving customers to supervising in the kitchen, but above all, he was dedicated to the time he spent at Dalisay's side. On one of these busy days, while they were organizing the week's supplies, Dalisay was particularly focused on something. On the kitchen counter were scattered worn-out sheets of paper, Luzviminda's recipes. "I'm going to try this kare recipe," said Dalisay excitedly, as she read the ingredients written in her mother's unmistakable handwriting. Bayani moved closer, looking at the letters he hadn't seen for decades, his eyes filled with emotion. "Your mother used to make the best kare I've ever tasted. It was the dish she prepared whenever she wanted to cheer me up." Dalisay stared at him for a moment, trying to decipher the sincerity in his voice. "She used to make it for me too when she wanted to celebrate something special. I think it's time to put this recipe on the menu." Bayani smiled, but his heart was tight. Every little decision Dalisay made that honored Luzviminda was a reminder not only of everything he had lost, but also of everything he could still achieve alongside his daughter. "If you need help chopping the ingredients," he said, trying to lighten the weight of the moment, "I think I still remember how to use a knife." Dalisay laughed lightly, shaking his head. "Let's see if your cooking skills are up to my mother's standard. I won't make it easy for you." It was a simple moment, but full of meaning. The kitchen, once a space of pain and memories, now became a place where they could share laughter and stories. As the restaurant flourished, something unexpected happened in Bayani's life. For the first time, he felt connected to something that went beyond his achievements in the corporate world. For years, he had dedicated every second of his life to building his real estate empire, sacrificing relationships and personal values in the name of success. But now, he found himself increasingly distant from his old life, and he didn't miss it. One afternoon, while watching Dalisay serve customers with a smile, Bayani realized that something needed to change. He was present in the restaurant, but his mind was still often drawn to the problems and responsibilities of his company. He didn't want to remain divided. He wanted to be completely at his daughter's side. That evening, he made an important call to his longtime assistant, Carla, who had always been his business confidant. "Carla," he said, with a resolute tone of voice. "I need you to organize a meeting with the company's board. I want to discuss hiring a new CEO." "Mr. De La Cruz," she replied in surprise, "are you thinking of stepping down?" "Yes," he confirmed without hesitation. "My priority now is my daughter. I've already wasted too much time on her, and I don't want to waste any more. The company can carry on without me. They don't need Bayani De La Cruz in charge. But Dalisay, she needs me, and I need her." Carla was silent for a few moments, but then replied with a slight smile in her voice, "Understood, sir. I'll arrange everything." At the board meeting, Bayani officially announced his decision. The initial shock soon gave way to acceptance, especially as he made it clear that he would remain the majority shareholder and strategic advisor. But above all, Bayani felt a deep sense of relief. For the first time, he was putting his family above all else. The transition was swift, and Bayani began to devote even more time to the restaurant. He got involved in every little detail, but always made sure that Dalisay was at the center of everything. The restaurant wasn't just a business, it was an extension of Luz Viminda's memory and a symbol of the new relationship between father and daughter. With her mother's recipes incorporated into the menu, Bagong Simula took on a unique feel. Customers started coming back regularly to try dishes like kare-kare and adobo, prepared with the love and authenticity that Luz Viminda always conveyed in her cooking. One evening after the restaurant had closed, Bayani and Dalisay were sitting together, enjoying a bowl of halo. It was one of those quiet evenings when the silence between them was not uncomfortable, but full of understanding. "You know," Bayani began, "every time I taste these recipes, it's like your mother is here with us. She always put so much love into everything she did. I think that's why her food was so special." Dalisay looked at him, her eyes shining with a mixture of nostalgia and gratitude. "She used to say that cooking was her way of caring for people. When I was little, I thought she was exaggerating, but now I understand. It's more than just food." Bayani smiled, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced for a long time. "She'd be so proud of you, Dalisay. You're so like her, not just in the kitchen, but in the way you take care of the people around you." She was silent for a moment, touched by his words. "Thank you, Bayani," she replied with a slight smile. It was still strange to call him by his name, but something inside her was changing. "Why don't you call me Dad?" he asked jokingly, but also with a hint of hope. She laughed softly. "Not yet, but maybe one day." Bayani nodded, accepting the answer with a smile. He knew that complete forgiveness would take time, but every small gesture, every moment like that, was a step towards what he wanted most. As the months passed, Dalisay found herself more open to Bayani's presence in her life. He was becoming not only a constant figure, but also someone she could trust. And with the restaurant thriving, she began to realize that despite everything, it might be possible to build a real relationship between them. One quiet afternoon, while Bayani was clearing the tables and Dalisay was testing a new recipe, she stopped for a moment and looked at him. "Bayani," she called hesitantly. He looked up, surprised. "Yes?" "I just wanted to say thank you for the effort, for the time you're putting in, for not giving up on me." Bayani was silent for a moment, moved by her words. "I would never give up on you, Dalisay. You're my daughter. And even though it took me a while to realize it, now that I'm here, I'll never leave." She smiled slightly and returned to the kitchen, feeling a lightness she had never felt before. For the first time, she believed that Bagong Simula wasn't just a pretty name. It really was a new beginning for both of them. The months passed, and the Bagong Simula restaurant became not only a commercial success, but also a home for Dalisay and Bayani. With Luz Viminda's recipes delighting customers and the welcoming atmosphere that father and daughter had created, the restaurant became known as a symbol of resilience and hope. The relationship between Bayani and Dalisay had evolved significantly. What was once full of mistrust and hurt was now beginning to solidify into something stronger, a genuine bond. Although there were still moments of hesitation, Dalisay felt for the first time that she could trust Bayani, and he, in turn, was determined never to let her down again. One evening, after the restaurant had finished another busy day, Bayani and Dalisay sat down at one of the tables as usual. He seemed more pensive than usual, which caught her attention. "What is it, Bayani?" she asked, picking up a bowl of rice pudding they had made for dessert. He looked at her for a moment, as if he were choosing his words carefully. "Dalisay, there's something I've been thinking about for a while, but I didn't know how to say it. Now I think it's the right time." She frowned, puzzled. "What is it?" Bayani took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I wanted to ask if you would consider moving in with me." Dalisay blinked, surprised. "Live with you? In your mansion?" "Yes," he replied hastily, fearing a negative reaction. "I know you like having your own space, and I understand that this can be a big step, but I want you to know that the house is as much yours as it is mine. It always has been. It's too big for me on my own. And honestly, I'd love to wake up every day knowing that you're there, that we're together as father and daughter." She was silent for a few moments, processing what he had said. The idea of living in a mansion was something that had never crossed her mind. All her life, she had become accustomed to small spaces, where every corner had a purpose. But Bayani's proposal didn't just seem to be about comfort or luxury. It was about creating a home, something she'd never had with him. Bayani smiled. "I want you to have a place where you can rest, where you can be looked after, a place that is also yours." Dalisay looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. For so long she had dreamed of a father who would put her first, who would care about her well-being, and now he was there, offering exactly that. She let out a short laugh, trying to ease the tension. "I don't know if I'll be able to cope with so much space. I hope you have a map of the house so I don't get lost." Bayani laughed along, relieved by her answer. "If you accept, I promise we'll do everything your way. You can choose the room you want, redecorate, whatever it takes to make you feel at home." Dalisay remained silent for a few more seconds before replying with a shy smile. "I accept. I think it's time to take that step." Bayani felt a huge weight come off his shoulders. He held her hands on the table, touched. "Thank you, Dalisay, for giving me this chance. You don't know how much this means to me." "I know," she said, her eyes shining. "And as hard as it was to get here, I'm glad we did." The move was a low-key event. Bayani made a point of getting everything ready before Dalisay arrived at the mansion. He hired a team to redecorate one of the rooms, transforming it into a space that reflected her taste, simple, welcoming, and full of touches reminiscent of Luzviminda. When Dalisay arrived for the first time, she was impressed by the grandeur of the house. The high ceilings, glittering chandeliers, and impeccable garden were unlike anything she had ever seen. But at the same time, there was something comforting about the way Bayani welcomed her, as if he was eager to share that space with her. "Welcome to your new home," he said, as he led her through the rooms. She looked around, still taking it all in. "It's beautiful, but a little intimidating. It's going to take some getting used to." "You have all the time in the world," he replied with a smile, "and I'll be here, every step of the way." Over the next few days, Dalisay began to feel more at home in the mansion. She found a new rhythm between working in the restaurant during the day and returning home in the evening, where she and Bayani would often have dinner together, discussing plans for the future. One evening, while the two of them were sitting in the garden, Dalisay brought up something she had been harboring in her heart. "Bayani," she began hesitantly, "I want to tell you something." He turned to her, attentive. "For a long time I thought I would never be able to forgive you. I thought that what you did, what you failed to do, was unforgivable. But in recent months, I've realized something. You didn't just ask for forgiveness. You've shown by your actions that you're sorry. And that means a lot to me." Bayani felt his eyes fill with tears, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "So, I want you to know that I forgive you. Not just for what happened to my mother, but for what happened to me too, because now I see that you're here, and that's what matters." Bayani couldn't hold back his tears. He held Dalisay's hands and said, his voice heavy with emotion, "Thank you, Dalisay. You don't know how much this means to me. I promise I'll never let you down again." She smiled, finally feeling free of the weight she had carried for so many years. For the first time, she felt like she had a family. Over the next few months, father and daughter continued to build a life together, full of simple but meaningful moments. The restaurant thrived, Luzviminda's recipes became a fixture in the community, and the mansion, once cold and empty, now resounded with laughter and human warmth. Bayani knew he could never make up for lost time, but he also knew that the future was theirs to write, and with Dalice by his side, he was determined to make every moment count. Together they proved that, even in the most difficult stories, there is always room for new beginnings and happy endings. And so ends the moving story of Dalice and Bayani, a journey of forgiveness, reconnection and love that proves it's never too late to start again. If you were moved by this story, leave a rating from 0 to 10 in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like to support our work and, of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more touching stories like this one. And there's more. Click on the video that's now appearing on your screen to watch another incredible story that will move your heart. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.